You're listening to Tara Lynn's A Geek Saga podcast. This episode features audio from a previously aired live video webcast.
Good evening, I'm Tara Lynn of Geek Saga Entertainment, and thanks for joining me for the Geek Saga Show! This episode is called When Fandom Goes Too Far, the curse of toxic fandom and how we can battle it. And it is an in-depth look at experiences I and my guests have had with toxic fandom, how these experiences changed us, and the way we perceive our fellow fans, and how we moved beyond the toxicity we've encountered. I'm joined by Bekah, Emmett, Farid, and Paul. So why don't you guys go ahead and introduce yourselves in that order, just share your name, any social media handles you have that you want to share, websites you want to highlight, whatever. Keep it, like 2 minutes or less per person.
Hi, I'm Bekah. I am a writer and I'm also a webcast host. I work for the Geeky area. I do a lot of queer inclusive media reviews. I also help run the Bitching Dead with Tara and Farid, which is a very critical webcast of the Walking Dead franchise. And I have a lot of feelings about fans. You can also find me at Starshine on Fire. I'm currently private on my handles, but you can just request to follow and I will accept it.
Hi, my name's Emmett. About 5% of the creative work I've done over my entire lifetime has to do with Star Trek. So that's what people actually most know about me. I've been a sound engineer, producer, and composer for Star Trek products on the franchise for over 10 years. It's been a very, very long time. I'd like to say I'm in my third 5-year mission at this point. I got together with a group of friends when we saw how toxic and crazy a lot of Star Trek fandom was, and we were like, wow, we can really do better. So we started our own, and it's going very well. You can find that at trekfan.org.
Hi, I am Paul Jenkins. I have been in the entertainment business for quite some time, so that now this is why my beard is grey. I have done everything from working for the Ninja Turtles. I was one of the first employees there. Also helped rebuild Marvel and its content in the mid to late 90s. Been at DC. So I basically have created across all media for many years. I've lectured at a number of futurism conferences. I've chaired an advisory committee for the governor of Georgia on digital, interactive, and filmmaking. So I kind of have an extensive resume of being in the public eye, dealing with fans and sort of seeing fan behavior. So that's me.
Hi, my name is Regal Hug, and I am a writer for the Geek Theory. I cover a whole lot of queer inclusive stuff. And as far as my books are concerned, you can check my fictional novels published under the pen name AJ Raven at a rate of Tempest071990 if you want to find me on Twitter and read some of my messy tweets. So yeah, and I also, of course, co-host The Bitching Dead with Tara and Bekah for the Geek Theory.
Okay, so just to give a bit of an introduction. While toxic fans have certainly always existed, as with just about any subject, the internet and then social media gave wannabe keyboard warriors a place to air their grievances with little to no fear of repercussion. And it also made them easier to surround themselves with a veritable army of followers in some cases. So I just wanted to start by talking about fans versus creators, or fans versus the things they love, and give a couple of famous examples. The first one I'm going to give is Voltron fan sails the good ship Blackmail. Back in 2017, some fans of Voltron Legendary Defender took a tour of Studio Mir, and they took unauthorized photos of confidential storyboards and then posted them on the internet. Now, many of these people removed their photos after finding out that Studio Mir could get in trouble with DreamWorks, their partner, over the leaks. But one fan refused because they wanted their ship Clance to be made canon. So basically saying, I'm not going to take my pictures down unless you make my ship canon. Of course, DreamWorks was like, yeah, no, we're ignoring this. And eventually everything died down. But the situation as a whole painted shippers in a very bad light. And don't worry, we will touch on personal experiences some of us have had with ship wars a little later. More recently, and I'm not going to get into every single example of this because it's kind of one lump sum. There's been a lot of fans having absolute conniptions over the casting of people of color in their beloved franchises. There was certainly a little bit with Game of Thrones and even the more recent casting of the new show House of the Dragon, but more so a lot of drama around Wheel of Time and the new Lord of the Rings show for Amazon. Now that's, just an entirely large thing in and of itself, but it's very much fans are fighting with each other about it, but they're also going after the creators. This isn't my Lord of the Rings, this isn't my Wheel of Time, etc. So I thought it was a good example to touch on real quick, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then Bekah, you had a big thing regarding the 100, correct?
Yeah. So with the 100, this was, gosh, how many years ago is this?
A lot.
A lot. Many years ago.
5,
yeah,
6,
something
7,
like 6
maybe.
or 5. Yeah, 6, 7 years ago. Jason Rothenberg made the decision to kill off Lexa, who was a queer icon in the 100. And he also killed off Lincoln, who is a character of color, a man of color as well. That started a backlash against Jason, who we called affectionately J Rat because he's a rat. And that started this anger fueling against him, but also it turned out that there had been a lot of bullying on set of Ricky Whittle, who played Lincoln, and who's the character who had died, and he had requested to be killed off because of all the bullying from the executive producers, like Jason. The absolute just shit hit the fan, especially with Clexa, and to the point where there's actually a convention now called ClexaCon, where queer women can have a safe space just because of the backlash from killing off this queer character.
Yeah, listen, sometimes creators need to be questioned. I'm certainly not saying that they shouldn't.
He issued an apology to fans, which really was not an apology at all. It basically was like, I'm sorry that you're upset, but I'm not sorry I did what I did. And he kind of was like, I'm the all-powerful creator. I can do whatever I want. And yes, well, you do have the power, the creative power, because this is your show. At the same time, you do have to understand that there are things that you should not do as a creator, like killing an LGBT character for the lulz, basically. He had no reason to kill her off.
It was
even though it was very bad. It was very very bad. The reception was horrible. His reaction was even worse. It was just very ugly in general. And I respect writers and creators who do what they do, but in this situation it was not cool.
I've been lucky so far as a creator myself, in that I've experienced very little toxicity from fans of the things I've put together. What little I've dealt with has been surrounding my conventions. And even that was almost always due to situational drama or extreme outside forces, COVID, versus overall toxicity, except perhaps some of the nastiness I experienced when I ran a Kickstarter for my Steven Universe convention, Beach City Con, because we were consistently being compared to Dash Con. Even after we pointed out, to people that our website,
a Kickstarter.
Yeah. Like we pointed out our websites to people that detailed at this point, I think I'd had like 6 years of experience running convention, like single fandom conventions, and other experience running a ton of other events, also like more local events, so yeah, that was an interesting time, but I've been lucky generally as a creator. Now that said, and this is probably mostly for Farid as an author, Emmett as Star Trek audio drama producer, etc., and Paul, of course, as well as a writer, editor. Have any of you had experiences with toxic fandoms as a creator?
Yeah, I've had plenty of experiences. I mean, I think that it's not just necessarily whether a fan is toxic, or whether it almost might be that the discourse or the dialogue or the environment is toxic, right? So, I think in a little while we'll probably get more into the psychology of fandom and why people are, act the way that they do. But, I can give you a number of examples. So one of them is I worked at Marvel and made a lot of their content for a long time. And one of the things I did was Civil War for them, right? So I was working on a book, and when we came up with the content and we were sort of looking at the way that the story would be told, one of the things that Marvel understandably said was that they wanted to make sure that it was presented, there were two sides to that story, right? If you think of like the way Civil War story was told, one side was like the pro-registration side, people that agreed that superheroes should be registered, and the other side was the anti-registration side. And one of them was headed up by Iron Man, and one of them was headed up fiction.
I'm getting flashbacks. Because I
Captain America.
Civil War.
Right, and so you know, one of the things that they asked me was, you know, can I try to avoid any political stuff, and I did. Right, I don't care about politics. I grew up as in the punk era in Great Britain, so politics is a load of shit. And so you know, the what happened very quickly was that fans decided that Iron Man represented the Republican side and Captain America represented the Democrat side, which I didn't understand, but they had decided for themselves that was the case. And so in my experience, I remember writing a character, and she was a reporter for a relatively left-wing kind of like liberal magazine. And she, as she went through her side of the story, you know, it was very much like man on the street version of Civil War. And many people attributed that to me. So they basically said that character represented my political views. And it really didn't matter what I said in response. I don't do politics. I don't care about that stuff. I'm not interested. All it showed was that she was a compelling and interesting character, because apparently I'd written her correctly, because she came across as being the thing I intended her to. But one thing that was very interesting to me was that she was a central focus of the story for a little while. And at a certain point, she kind of encounters a character that, for the sake of argument, is like a John McCain type character. And she's very left-wing in her political beliefs. And she challenges the guy, and the guy actually proves her wrong. And so all of the 5 or 6 issues out of maybe 11 that had led to that point, you had thought that her perspective was correct. And then he actually showed her she was incorrect. Not because I had any particular political things to say about John McCain or Republicans, or that, you know, it wasn't that one person was right or wrong. She just happened to be wrong about something. Well, I had watched a load of toxicity being attributed to me online, where fans would sort of say, like, Jenkins is a liberal, Jenkins does this, he's intending to promote a liberal worldview. And then when I collapsed that liberal worldview in the story, and in fact, the more Republican character actually proved to be correct in the story, nothing, crickets, right? Nothing to be said. There's no climb down from fandom, right? They don't say, oh man, I actually appreciate where Paul Jenkins was going with that story. I get it now. And none of the Republican people that had been complaining sort of stepped up and said, wow, he was on our side all along, or even attributed that to me. It turned the worldview upside down. They realized that no one had been correct about what we were doing with that story. If anything, it was just silence. And I've experienced that before. And I'm sorry to keep just making it my experiences, but when I wrote a book called The Inhumans for Marvel, it did really well, and it won an Eisner Award. And they hadn't won one for a long time, so they were really excited about the way the book was going. I didn't know what would happen. The first book came out fine. The second book came out, it was like the internet exploded. We were the greatest comic book that had been written since Watchmen. And I'm like, it's just a comic book. Like, how did that happen? So it went on and it went on, and it was all positive. There was nothing wrong. There was no one complaining about the Inhumans. And what I noted was round about issue 9 that I thought was my favorite and the one that I really thought they would love, nothing. They had nothing to say. So Farid, this is why I mentioned pre-show that I think there is an equation for this. I think that when you look at the amplification of opinions on the internet, you can go to any message board, pick one, pick the Cleveland Browns message board or anything that has to do with fandom. And if you go in, you'll find that 85% of comments are negative because that gets a reaction. 5% are positive because that doesn't get a reaction, and 10% are neutral. And that's what I noted, was that with the Inhumans, it was a wildly successful book. It was selling out. People loved it, and they continued to love it. And if anything, it grew as we went along. But the chatter and the conversation about the Inhumans had, because the people that liked it had already said they liked it. So I think that what you're seeing here is that negativity is almost guaranteed to create a reaction. And when people get a reaction, they think that their worldview means something more than it actually does.
That's like a huge deal. And it's something that I do try to tell fans once in a while. Mainly is that just as a creator, they don't have to answer the questions that we have to answer every day. They don't have to report to the same people. They don't have to keep a bunch of things in mind when they're thinking, when, like, I have to know that I'm working on a very, very large, billion-dollar franchise, and that means I have to get things done on time and under budget. And that is what's going to happen. I don't care what has to happen for that to be true, but that's going to happen. But I've had years and years and years. I wrote and produced radio and TV commercials for a shady basement waterproofer for like less than minimum wage for a long time. And that's the kind of stuff you have to do to get a job like the one I've got. And the pressures are very, very different. And if someone's at home reading comic books, they're like, I could write a story better than this. And I'm like, good God, I wish you would. That would be lovely. I think
I don't have to do it.
a million times over. And they get invested. And Star Trek has a really, really big problem with this early toxicity because Star Trek was, brought back by a letter writing campaign to NBC. And, that wasn't really as grassroots as it seemed it was. But fans felt invested in this now that they could, keep a show on the air or change people's minds and get support at the network to make a difference. And the truth is they just can't. I wish it were the opposite way. It is very, very, very difficult to kind of get that thing done.
I'd love to add to that as well, Emmett, because one thing that, what fans think their influence is and what it actually is are somewhat different. So I can remember...
orders of magnitude, right?
Orders of magnitude, yeah. And so our job is to deliver something professionally, and my personal job is to want to deliver it with a sense of sort of like professional excellence, right? And just to make sure that you create the material and it goes out. And so when you work for Marvel or Disney, Sony, Warner Brothers, 2K Games, any of the ones that I work for, you're not allowed to deliver it half-assed. You can't deliver it late. You don't have a job if that's the way that you deliver it.
It's not an option. You will work at GameStop.
Right. And so I remember when we were about to do Civil War, actually, that's a good example again, right? I was with the editor-in-chief of Marvel, Joe Quesada, and we were at his house and we were going to meet another creator, Garth Ennis, at a pub. And it was like 6 or 7 blocks away. And we thought, well, we'll walk. And Joe put something to me and asked me if I could do something. And it was this character called Speedball. Now, one of the advantages that I have in doing comic books, for example, was that I don't know anything about comic books. And it seems crazy, but I was never a fan of stuff. I don't have much of a fan mentality of anything. So I didn't really know what I couldn't do. And I had my own unique voice for stuff. That's why we were able to make the Inhumans work. So Joe said to me that the biggest problem that he had, or a lot of late chatter just before we did Civil War, was about this character Speedball. Because the fact is that every time they had tried to do Speedball, they had never succeeded with it. And the fans would go nuts and they would do these letter writing. And Joe's answer was always the same thing. If you really want Speedball to come back, vote with your dollars. Because if it sells 3,000 copies, we're not publishing Speedball when Captain America sells 300,000 copies, right? Fans who wanted Speedball didn't care about that argument. And that seems insane to me. Like, you can't just kind of say, I expect this and I'll scream until I get what I want. But what that spoke to was the access that fans now have to creators. And I think that's somewhat problematic now.
Yeah, I mean, I maybe it's an age thing. And I don't mean that in like a, oh God, those youngsters way. I'm not that old, but I didn't have access to, God, even the internet until I was almost done with high school. And then it was dial-up and weak at best. But, so I think it could be my age that has put me in this realm of like, there's things I would love to see happen in, like storylines I would love to see, characters I would love to get together, shipping, or I would like to see this comic or this comic book character get his own, run or her own run. But I've always kind of understood that as much as I want that, and as much as I might talk about wanting it on the internet, it's certainly not going to happen just because I want it, or even because any sort of large group of fans want it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's an age thing. I don't, or if it's just it depends on the person. But Farid, you were kind of nodding along when they were talking about, because I think it was Paul was talking about like reviews and stuff like that. I mean, have you, because I know you've written quite a few books, like have you had people kind of come at you at all with like, love this, but want this to happen, sort of like trying to convince you to change something you'd planned or whatever?
Fortunately, no. Even though a whole lot of my books have like sold, I would say thousands of copies when it comes to my short stories and whatnot. Thankfully, none of the reviewers have actually told me that they wanted, but I want a specific story to go a specific way. I guess they're just happy with what I write or something. Or maybe some of them are, they didn't like it and they leave a bad review, but they don't necessarily want something to happen in a particular way, which I'm thankful for because I've been part of shipping fandom and I don't want to be involved in it.
I was going to say, come on over to Star Trek. I'll make your dreams come true.
Do it, Farid. Do it.
I don't want to be on the other side where the actual shipping fandom is actually against me, the creator of something.
Right.
So I don't want to experience that. I'm just saying that I'm happy. I'll be happy with a bad review. If you want to give me a bad review, give me a bad review. But don't create entire campaigns to convince me that this certain character needs to act a certain way or a story needs to go a certain way. That I don't want to experience.
That happens in Star Trek constantly. And the one thing I would say to the younger fans is like, it doesn't matter how many of you want this to happen on Star Trek. But if one of you is willing to work really, really hard for a long time, it's not out of the question. Like, there are so many people online complaining about Star Trek that have been doing it for over 20 years. And if they had put 10% of the effort they put writing online into learning a skill that could be useful somewhere on the franchise, there is a non-zero chance that they could be working on Star Trek right now. Like, the group think doesn't work in terms of we all want this, so this should happen. But if someone's willing to actually put the effort in, people get hired. Like on Star Trek, it's a big franchise, but we weren't grown from VATS to like know what plasma coils are, right? Like we weren't taught this from small children. They're just people. They're just other people, and they all work really hard. So
yeah, and then one last thing to sort of say on that, I think, which is, we're in a time that I think that there are like momentous parts of human history. The agricultural revolution was where we learned how to plant seeds and grow things and stay in one place, right? And so you can trace back to the way humanity changed because we understood what happened, when we were growing things, and then the Industrial Revolution did the next thing, which is sort of like automate that stuff and allow us to sort of like travel and do spread around the world. And we're in the digital revolution, and we're literally in the first couple of decades of it right now. And what's happened is it's changing human behavior, and it's changing our understanding. Perhaps because we are now able to blare out to the internet, we do, right? We say our opinion all the time. This is what I had for breakfast, and I want you to see what it was on my Twitter feed. And I'm like, I don't give a shit about what you ate, bacon. I don't care. But we are starting to get to a point where we feel like the things that we say without this is a substantive conversation, and so there's the intent of this kind of type of conversation is we're trying to talk about an idea. But if you are constantly just spouting your ideas and you're saying your things and you've got like sort of that, it's tempting because the algorithms will just send us into an echo chamber that will get our same opinions like parroted back at us. So I think that's another thing, which is people the internet seems to have amplified poor fan behavior, and it seems to have amplified people's opinion of their value in terms of intellectual discourse. Like if this is the information superhighway, then how come we are all navigating it on fucking pogo sticks? No one is navigating it well. It's the art of communication, right? So sharpen your pencils, everybody. Learn how to communicate. How come we got more access to communicate with people now and people are less able to communicate? Partly because we don't care. We're not intending to care now. It's sheer volume now. It's not substance. And I think that's the other thing is I think if you yell a lot and you say a lot of things very, very, very loudly in all caps, people might pay attention to you. And so that's what everybody starts doing. And now everybody's yelling really loudly. It's time to, we have to slow down. And I think it's going to take us a couple of generations to find that sweet spot where in the digital revolution, we actually know how to communicate properly.
Also, certain fans forget that the entire world isn't on Twitter. And also that comic book stories, movies, it's a business.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, Twitter isn't their target demographic, basically.
Mm-mm.
So certain friends
Twitter
forget it.
especially.
Yeah, fans are like, you know what? I want this character to hook up with this character. I want more certain types of stories. And I'm like, you know what? If those stories made enough money, people would be making it. The suits would be investing in such stories. So yeah, you can keep on talking about them. Maybe one day they will get made, because if you look towards Hollywood and the type of movies that they're producing, there's a whole lot of diversity going on. There's a whole lot of queer inclusivity going on, but it takes time, because they need more people as supporters, not just your little echo chamber saying that we need such stories, we need such stories. But
One
yeah,
thing-
I agree with Paul with the equation that, you know what, it's all about the negativity. Negativity gets the hits, negativity gets the attention. So that's why a whole lot of comments are going to be negative compared to books that do very well. They don't get talked about that much online.
Yeah, there's one thing that Quentin Tarantino said that I thought was brilliant. He was talking to a bunch of film students, and he's like, "How many of you want to be film directors?" And everybody put their hand up. He's like, "How many of you want to become film distributors?" And nobody's hand went up, because that's boring and awful. If like that were the case, like it would be so much easier to make movies if there were a lot more creative people focusing on, you know, delivering movies rather than just making them. Then there would be a wider choice to go to. One thing that drives me crazy, people talk about, especially like this is near and dear to my heart, is trans representation on television and film. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal for the trans community. It absolutely needs to happen, and it should. But they don't understand that the industry is not set up to even give them what they want. Like, I strongly promote transgender talent agencies, because the more juice they have, the more odds they'll be able to talk to a producer and get a trans artist hired for a trans role. And when you're producing, again, you are making your mark, and you are on budget, and you are on time, or you are dead forever. So people need to understand that what they want to see in terms of representation is not necessarily because people think that it's bad, or that they don't think it should be seen, or that they don't think America can take it. It's just not a part of their business model yet, where it's super easy for them to reach out and grab a trans actor of any gender or color in a particular role. As much as we would love to see that, it's just it's slower than you think it is.
Well, and I think that Paul is talking about the screaming on the internet, and like we're all kind of saying, like, you can yell as much as you want, but it's probably not going to change anything immediately. Especially that kind of leads into one of the things I want to mention. I don't really want to get into a lot of detail about this, but it's a good example of towing the line between fans versus creators and fans versus other fans. Now, it is an indie creator in this particular case, but just quick mention, because it's very famous, of Gamergate, which happened back in, I think, 2015. An indie game developer was essentially accused by her ex-boyfriend of trading sexual favors for good reviews of her game, because she actually had been doing really well. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, but she's only getting those reviews because now, not surprisingly, these accusations were like deemed unfounded, but she'd already been hurt by them. And then the Gamergate movement refused to let things die down. A group of Gamergate supporters on 4chan backed this gaming project from the Fine Young Capitalists, aka TFYC, because I don't feel like saying that name every single time, because that group had a prior dispute with with this developer. And eventually somebody, it could have been an Indiegogo, it could have been a hacker, got the TFYC Indiegogo campaign shut down. And Indiegogo did make a statement saying that due to the participation of the Gamergate supporters, TFYC were at least inadvertently participating in the harassment of the developer, but it was kind of too little too late. So this is one of those, and I don't know, it's like fans in quotes, because I guess they weren't really fans of hers, but because of what happened with, I guess, trolls on the internet coming after this creator, it actually caused, like, them supporting this campaign and the back and forth and the whole Gamergate thing, it actually did pit women against each other as well. And then in an attempt to prove that their little Gamergate movement wasn't misogynistic, they kind of like continued to be blatantly misogynistic, and they continued to defend themselves after the fact rather than own up to their mistakes. And it was basically a whole lot of shouting back and forth on the internet between fans and creators, because there were a ton of video game creators who they were saying, like, they were trying to help this woman. So it's kind of it's almost a neither here nor there, but I like that it toes the line between our first conversation about fans versus creators and fans versus the thing they love, and how those things can turn into fans versus fans, because Gamergate began with a people, but also in a way fans versus creators, video game fans basically versus a creator for whatever stupid reasons were behind it. They were very stupid. But it began with that, and Gamergate became a fans against fans movement, because it's like some people who didn't really understand what it was saying, but it's not misogynistic. And you know that they were probably just not really looking into what it was, right? But that's not an excuse. Like, ignorance is not an excuse. I'm sorry, it's not. So it became a fans versus fans thing when it was, but it's not misogynistic. And, this other group of people saying, yes, it is misogynistic. So on that note, to, like I said, kind of segue this into fans versus other fans, there were a couple just, again, famous things I wanted to mention as examples. And one of them, the second one, is going to lead straight into kind of what I think is going to be the meat of this discussion, which is the psychology of how these things happen. First and foremost, have any of you guys, other than me and possibly Farid and Bekah, because they also write for the Geek Area, have you guys heard of the Final Fantasy VII house?
No.
No. Okay. So I'm going to start with that. Final Fantasy VII house the whole thing started with this girl named Joanna who gathered people in need and claimed she could give them a home. They were all Final Fantasy VII fans, but only if they allowed her to call them by Final Fantasy names and take part in her magical rituals. This is very weird, right? Yeah, I don't know what they were. Okay, like, listen, I did not want to dig that deep.
Okay, no, I do know what you're talking about. Okay, continue.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So Joanna turned out to be manipulative and secretive. Money that the residents brought into this house was essentially confiscated to keep the house running. The living space still, despite that, became this cesspool of filth and abuse. If people left, they were shunned both on and offline, which scared a lot of the residents into staying much longer than they wanted to. And it also didn't help that a lot of them didn't have anywhere else to go or didn't have the funds to move on again, because she was confiscating all their money. This house eventually, metaphorically collapsed in on itself, but the toxicity that the residents experienced and the way that toxicity made a certain subset of fandom appear has kind of lived on. Now, that's one example. Example number two, and these are both, because these both revolve around a person who gathered a group of people around to support them, and that, it turned into just this whole little, like, different subset of toxic fandom. The second example I wanted to give is Cassandra Clare. Cassandra Clare is best known right now as the author of the YA series The Mortal Instruments, but she got her start as a pretty infamous Harry Potter fan. She during her time in fandom, she kind of rose to fandom stardom, and she wrote a lot of fanfic and did some other things, I think, but over this period of time that she was really big in the Harry Potter fandom, she was accused of everything from plagiarism to profiteering to cyberbullying. She had a history of sicking lawyer friends on anyone who brought up her questionable actions. And most of the blog entries and wiki articles that detailed her wrongdoings were deleted very quickly without explanation during this period of time. So at the very least, she is a controversial figure. The middle ground is that she's a fandom famous person who got partially or possibly mostly plagiarized works published. At the worst, she's a bully who used her fandom fame and her connections to silence her detractors. Now, in summarizing these famous toxic fans or fandom situations, mostly from articles that I wrote anywhere from like 3 to 5+ years ago, I realized that in lumping them together like this, these toxic fans and their followers seemed both eerily familiar and similar. So on that note, I'd like to delve into a discussion on the psychology of cultism and its connection to fan behavior. And I know, Paul, I know you have a bunch to say, and Farid, I think you'll have, I'm sure, some things to weigh in on because, masters in psychology. So, and obviously Emmett and Bekah and myself, if we have anything to say, chime in, but as usual, be polite, don't interrupt each other, etc.
I'm just gonna vibe. I'm at this. I've like entered this space where I'm just.
Oh, we'll get your shipping stuff. We'll get to that.
First thing I want to say, Tara, is you described Heaven's Gate. Mm-hmm. The first example you gave of the house is exactly the description of what happened with the Heaven's Gate cult.
I
the people that ended up
a documentary about that. It's wild.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I don't know. But I mean, basically, the way that Heaven's Gate was set up was basically isolate people, and then put them in a place, take away their, so when they came into the Heaven's Gate cult, they had their stuff taken away from them. Their stuff that was taken away was used to finance the cult, and so on and so forth, right? Now, what did this all have in common? What did Heaven's Gate have in common with the two examples that you just cited? It was a bunch of people that were potentially vulnerable, perhaps, that saw their identity shared with other people because of a shared love of something or a shared belief or a shared need, manipulated by a narcissist, right? Manipulated by somebody that's really, really vile to them, who doesn't have their best interests at heart, but knows how to to set the cues, right? So when you go to the cues of what makes people behave the way that they do, you have to kind of start looking at the psychology behind it. And you can go down to that on the basest, most neurological level. And the first thing to look at to understand why this happens with toxic fans and the straight line that you can draw between something like Gamergate and QAnon. Right, you can draw a line between those two things. And what you have to look at is, why do human beings do the things that they do? And some of it is grounded, or rooted, I should say, in why we make decisions and where we carry biases, right? Where cognitive biases come from. Why do we have biases? So I'm going to kind of set the table for this discussion by kind of setting up a little example or something for us to consider. We come from a bunch of little monkeys, right? And so you have to go back, a couple of million years to where, for millions of years, we were conditioned to do certain things. There's a need for us to be very, very careful because we're going to get killed. Our brains are not yet developed enough to be top of the food chain. We haven't developed weapons. We haven't developed guns. So we're going to be eaten by a lion if we encounter a lion, right? So what would we do? We would hang around. Imagine we're on the edge of the plain and we're under a tree and we've got a little bit of safety under this tree and there's some food out there and it's 20 yards from us. And what you have to do as a little monkey person, you got to sit there and say to yourself, okay, can I walk out there and get that food? Because, what does the air smell like? Is there a lion around? Are the birds chirping? What's going on? What are the sounds that I can hear? And very, very carefully, you kind of edge out from the tree line to see if you can get that food. So most of the dominant things that come in our lives are driven by fear. We are driven by fear, and we've overcome fear because of our rational brains. Second part of it is that we're tribal by nature. You have to be part of something, right? Now, one of my sons is a really nice-natured boy. He just turned 16. Very kind guy, right? I'm so proud of him because he's a very nice person, and he's very popular at school. So even though he's a geek, a nerdy kind of Dungeons and Dragons kid, everyone likes him. But he's found his tribe, right? His tribe are his Dungeons and Dragons guys at the comic book store, and that's his group, and that's who he interacts with. And so when you feel like you might be an outcast, or you might just be a little bit of an outsider, or you're trying to find your identity, you're going to walk into a place where you meet people that are like you, and they think like you do, and you're like, great, I'm part of that. That's why, and this is fundamentally part of what Desmond Morris wrote about years ago, an anthropologist in Britain, about football hooliganism, right? Like, why do we put on red and then point at the team in blue and go, we're going to kill you, right? Why do we do that? because it's our tribe and we feel safe in our tribe and we feel like those behaviors are correct for us because we know that we've got something in common with people. So as long as we understand that most of our decisions are made because of our fight or flight mechanism that took millions and millions of years to be inside us, we're not getting rid of it that easily. And that tribalism is driven by our need to belong because it's safe. When I heard someone once say that people don't really want freedom, they want safety. And I kind of agree with that, right? People do want freedom, of course, but really they prefer to have safety. And if we feel safe, everything else is a bit easier to deal with. And so what happens in that mechanism is that we feel like our rational brain can overcome it. We feel that we can do something about it, and we find the things that we like. We get involved with a group of like-minded people, and what happens when someone with nefarious intent walks into that group where people are joining in? It could be a Dungeons and Dragons group, right? And if you've got someone with bad intent that can dangle that Dungeons and Dragons thing in front of you and say, yeah, we're all together. And the psychology of cult leaders is they do the same thing. They walk in, they show you the thing that you want. You're like, yeah, I'm a Dungeons and Dragons person. I love Dungeons and Dragons. And the next thing they do is tell you, yeah, but everyone that doesn't like Dungeons and Dragons is your enemy. They're against you. Or the people that like Dungeons and Dragons differently from you are your enemy and they're against you. That's when it gets problematic. It's bad people walking into the space, understanding how to manipulate other people and sort of cue them to think like they need them to think. That's when then toxic fandom goes awry. And I feel that in most of the cases where I've looked at any of this kind of stuff, it's always been that someone's walked in from outside and they've basically dangled that same thing that they love in front of them. And then they've done the cultish kind of mechanisms to say, everyone else is against you. You know, I'm the keeper of the real Dungeons and Dragons and everyone else is not, or something like that. And when they do that, that's when it all goes to hell.
I mean, of course, I agree with Paul. It's been, for those of you wondering, all of this tribalism thing, it's been proven. Psychological theories, read up on them. Now, I remember when I was doing my psychology degree, the Twilight movies were coming out during that time.
God.
Yeah, Twilight movies were coming out. And of course, they were a big thing here over in Pakistan too. So,
wait, you have things in Pakistan, Farid?
You have things in Pakistan, Farid?
We have movies. We have Twilight. We have vampires.
Sorry, this is a long running joke with us.
Yeah. Also, Paul saying that when someone nefarious comes in, the cult thinking and all of that. I remember that when the Twilight movies were coming in, if you look at the promotional content, the PR team was kind of encouraging that Team Jacob and Team Edward thing. Like sometimes these things are also encouraged. And again, coming back to what Paul said about us being into creating tribes and finding the people that we like. And after we find the people that we like, even though nature actually wanted us to group together to become safe, we don't need that type of safety no more. So that's why when we find a tribe, anyone can come in, someone with bad intentions, and they can actually focus all of that energy into something negative. And that's what we see a lot when it comes when it comes to shipping, that someone is directing that towards the other group and saying that, you know what, those people are wrong, you guys are right, and you need to squash that tribe out. You need to squash them out. And that's why I remembered we actually did a little assignment on the team Edward and team what was it, Jacob? Yeah, Jacob and Edward thing. During our psychology, I think it was like second year of my psychology. I don't even remember. But yeah, we did that little thing when we were talking about cults. Now, of course, our teacher weren't really into the topic being discussed because I don't think they really understood where we were coming from. But yeah, the tribe thing, it's encouraged by media, and that's why I, as a writer for the Geekery, I sometimes also call out certain promotional practices that actually encourage fans to go at each other's throats. Like, don't do that. But again, coming back, negativity sells online, and that's why a whole lot of marketing people do that.
Yeah, but then a lot of them aren't prepared for the fact that, like, if we're negative, the fans might be too. Like, they don't, it's like it doesn't compute. Or maybe it does and they don't care. And that's an entirely different discussion, because if they don't care about the negativity they might be creating, amongst their fans, then that's like,
oh, they don't care. They don't care until the negative is directed at them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fans can keep on fighting with each other.
What's something else that you can think of that has used the negative tactics, Farid? Something else that you can think of?
Teen Wolf. Of course, Teen Wolf.
I don't think these problems are. Yeah,
Sorry,
I don't necessarily think that toxic fandom is, lycanthropy based, but you're making a good point.
Yeah, no. I mean, for sure. And well, I guess, and Paul, like, this tribalism stuff, it's one of the things that we've talked about one-on-one is the groupthink culture and how that leads to people being indoctrinated into a certain, I mean, we can call it a cult or you can just call it a certain group, but it's...
Yeah, I think you have to work out where cults start and where the thought process is behind cultism or fan-driven behavior. First of all, let's take a look at the word fan. It stands for fanatic, so fan stands for fanatic, right? Mm-hmm. And you have to remember that, right? Now, there's different kinds of tribalism that are very helpful to us, right? So let's take an unpopular view, right? I'm not a very religious person, but I think that there's a place for organized religions to help communities, for example, right? It's certainly, there'll be one side that says, well, organized religion is sort of like lying to people and, kind of getting access to their wallets because they'll give you money. But there's another side of it, which is very community based, right? So you can all congregate, and I'm sure that's been something that's been done for centuries, right? The thing about it is that there's positive and negative to tribalism, and there's positive and negative to our fight or flight response that, like dictating things to us, right? Like we should be careful sometimes, but there are so many cognitive biases inside us, right? And we all have them. And so I'm going to challenge anyone sort of watching this or even the other panel members with sort of like a thought experiment, because this is the way that our brains work. And it's going to work the same for the five of us on this panel as it would work for anyone watching or listening. You have biases. And one of the most fundamental biases that you have is sometimes known as the bias. It's the one that says, I don't have any biases, right? Like you think you don't have any biases. And that itself is a bias, because you do, right? You've got biases because of the way you were grown up. You've got biases because of the things that you feel, because of the things that you see, because of your chemical imbalances or balances or whatever it is that you might have. It's fundamentally part of you. It's the environment that you're in. One bias that is very powerful is the false consensus bias. And basically, we believe that more people agree with us than is actually true, right? So it's very powerful in fandom. You think that everyone agrees. Everyone says that. Everyone knows that, you say. No, they don't, right? Everyone doesn't know that. People disagree with each other about their interpretations of something from Star Wars, Star Trek, religious beliefs. People disagree with each other all the time, and especially politics, right? Especially politics in this world now. If you look at the United States of America, the internet has weaponized reality against, groups against each other. It's just basically taken people and said, your reality is the one that I'm going to tell you it is, right? And you agree with me, or so it takes other people that don't agree with you and it makes them an enemy. It's the psychology of cultism. It basically makes an enemy out of someone that doesn't agree with you. So now we can take something like Star Wars, right? The first movies were the best. The original movies were the best. And someone else says, no, I like the latest movies. Those were my favorite. And then someone really unpopular says, no, I like the three in the middle. Those were the best. You all like Star Wars, right? But you don't like it. You all hate the other Star Wars, but you like your Star Wars. In other words, you like the things that are part of your world, and you don't like the things that are part of someone else's worldview, and that's fundamentally part of who we are as human beings. So you can understand.
I'm so happy about that. That makes me so happy. Like,
what makes you happy?
It makes me happy because people understand that when you're talking about science fiction and fantasy or these fully realized worlds, right? Star Trek, we do this seasonally, right? Like the new show's not as good as the old show. Repeat forever, right?
Right.
The one thing that's that we can learn about the Star Wars stuff is there are hundreds of hours of Star Trek, and they're not all gold. They're just not. They can't be. It's law of averages. Now that there's more and more and more Star Wars content, there's more and more Star Wars cat fighting.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they're just getting more material. And the more material you have, the more divisive it's going to become.
It's no longer just the originals versus the prequels. It's,
right.
Right? Like, and now people are like, well, the prequels, they were great compared to whatever else, compared to the new movies.
Yeah. And I mean, we went through it with Ninja Turtles, right? Because we did the thing at the beginning. It was nothing. And then the next thing you know, it blew up. And I was like one of the first employees there, and it just exploded, right? So now we're doing Ninja Turtles. And I'll never forget when the first movie came out. And when that happened, there were kids. I mean, there were kids around the block. The kids with their families literally lined up around the block. That was like a cultural phenomenon, that first movie, the first Ninja Turtle movie. And the cartoon was cool and the toys were cool. And here comes the first movie. And then 15 years, 20 years went by, and suddenly it was old school. 15 years went by, and it's like, we're reviving the Ninja Turtles. I'm like, God, I feel old. And that was the first time they revived it. Now I feel really old, right?
Right.
There's all these cycles of Ninja Turtles, and what was the best one? And what about the one from a couple of years ago? So that was really cool, and it was really cool. And what about the Michael Bay version? And some people love that Michael Bay version. Did I? Not really. I don't care. I don't mind. I don't mind if it's new. I didn't really care for it. I watched it and went, I don't know, it doesn't really feel like it's got much heart. But that's only my opinion, right? Because someone else can have their own opinion, and that's fine. And I think this is the bit where you heard me say earlier on, I don't really have much of a fan mentality. So I've never really been a bit of a big fan saying I've got to protect the original. I could protect the original OG Ninja Turtles if I really want to stand for it, but I don't care because everyone has their own way of thinking about things.
And here's the other thing. The original Turtles do not need your protection.
They don't.
They're available. You can buy them in stores right now. You can pick up Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. Like, I can pull, if I want to watch original Star Trek, I can pull it off my shelf and watch it. If I want to see original Turtles, I can buy original issues. It's available. They're around. No one is taking anything away by adding more to the canon.
Well, and I want to point out this comment that I'm just highlighting right now, because it's literally exactly what you guys are saying, is that, when with Star Wars, each generation has its own trilogy to an extent. There's a little bit of mix and match there, but they're done at that time for that generation, and it's really cool that we all get that. And I'm kind of in this weird generation where I was raised on the original Star Wars and even got to see the revamped ones in the theaters in the mid-90s. But really, the new Star Wars for me were the prequels, and I don't love the prequels, but there's definitely things I would just throw out from them entirely. But as a whole, I still have this huge attachment to them. Again, I'm both aging myself, and I think it might be because of my age that I have these strong feelings where I don't, I might love the originals the best still because they're what I was introduced to first. But I also really, really love the prequels because they're the ones I got to see for the first time. And I really, really love the new ones because minus the last one, but I'm not going to get into that. At least the first two of the last one, they really spoke to me like on a personal level. And then of course we get The Mandalorian and even the Boba Fett show, and really even before that, Star Wars Rebels particularly, were all. I mean, that's what I really love. I think about Dave Filoni is that he has a really amazing talent for mixing the old with the new. Which has, and I think to be honest, a lot of Star Wars fans, they may not like every single thing he does, but at least in my circle, and again, I'm in a closed circle here of people who echo my own opinions. As much as I would love to say that's not the case, I think we all have to admit that it is. We are all in closed circles that echo our own opinions. So
which is basically a thing called the confirmation bias.
Right, right. And as much as you try to like see and hear and respect other people's opinions, outside of the very obvious, no, I'm not seeing, hearing, or respecting your opinion if you're a misogynistic or racist piece of shit. But that's
right.
Well, the other thing
And
too is
yeah, go
you
on.
understand that like your bias among your friends in your cohort in your age range, right? You are adults and you understand that your opinions about Dave Filoni, unless they are being expressed on like a Lucas film campus, that they won't really matter very much. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But that's a switch that gets turned on the internet when the fight gets turned on. That's when a lot of that clicks in.
Right, and I think the one thing that is the hardest to overcome, if you think about it, is this, and this is why I said there's like a thought experiment, right? If you are living your life, it's very hard for me to tell you you're crazy, right? But let's say that you are having issues. If you hear that, your natural reaction is going to be, "Hey, there's nothing wrong with me. It's you that do that," right? That's exactly. But then there are some people that are very tough in all of this. There are some, again, is short for fanatic, and so you've got people. There's a young woman who was shot dead on her doorstep because she was a singer, and the head of a fan club came up and basically gunned her down. You know, that's pretty crazy, right? But you couldn't have told the person, who was about to go pull the trigger that they were doing something crazy, because at that point they didn't think they were doing something crazy. They thought they were doing something they needed to do, right? And so in this situation, it's just that when fan groups go awry, what you're probably watching is it being led by an agenda to lead it that way. Most of the people in these fan groups that are getting upset because they've been given information that's not true, or they've been, the information has been couched in a certain way. Now, when you go to those people and you say, wow, you're acting really irrationally, you really need to slow down, calm down, settle down for a minute, right? They're like, don't tell me to calm down, you calm down, and off we go. It's very, very hard to beat these biases. And so I think that's the thing that's very difficult, because it's hard enough to beat those biases just in a group. And before the internet, there was still football hooliganism, right? Mid-'80s in England, sports was crazy, right? Can you imagine that level of hooliganism amplified by the internet? Would have been insane.
And so just to kind of go, because I want to move on into some of our own personal stories. As someone who has spent the vast majority of my time in fandom on/at in-person events, founding and organizing 2 single fandom conventions, speaking on more panels than I can even count anymore at so many conventions, I can't remember all of them, and who generally avoids online discussions about the things I love, I've had a largely positive experience. The few negative experiences I've had, weirdly enough, were almost entirely ones I was dragged into by toxic fans for stuff that I don't even have a huge interest in. The main one that comes to mind, first, whatever, because I think it probably was my first, was Supernatural fandom. I watched about 1 season of Supernatural, the first one, when it aired, and then I moved and didn't have cable and stopped watching it. And years and years and years later, I start writing for the Geekiary, and the Geekiary was founded by Destiel shippers. Mm-hmm. So while I mostly only do webcasts with the Geekiary now, I used to write a lot for them and promote them on Twitter and whatnot. So the Geekiary stopped covering SPN a long time ago. I can't even remember when. But even years after they stopped covering it, I personally, at a Geek Saga Twitter, was subjected to random attacks by SPN fans just because I wrote for the Geekiary. Even when I would respond with things like, I don't even watch this show, they wouldn't acknowledge my response, and then they would eventually start pinging me with their nastiness again. I don't even know which SPN contingent was coming at me. I guess it was just anybody and everybody who just wasn't a Destiel shipper, maybe. I don't know. But having to deal with that put such a sour taste in my mouth that even if I had at some point thought that maybe I want to try really watching Supernatural through, that's never going to happen now because of this. I've obviously had other toxic fan/fandom experiences. That's the one I always go back to, though, because it's probably still, even to this day, with everything I've experienced from certain members of the Star Trek fandom, another fandom I'm not really directly involved in, the most like, wait, what, why? Of my toxic fandom stories is Supernatural. So on that note, Bekah hasn't said much yet. I'm gonna start with Bekah and then just let's go Bekah, Emmett, and I guess, I don't know, Paul, if you have much to weigh in on this, and then Farid, but toxic fandom stories as a fan, thoughts, things that you've experienced, whatever.
So I guess I don't really think about the whole us versus them thing, which I really should, because it's very othering. Fandom forces us into a very othering situation. It is, especially with ship wars, because it's very much us versus them. Like Paul said, the tribalism. You pick your people and you stay with your people, and that causes a lot of tension. Even though these are fake people with fake relationships, there's no reason for people to be at each other's throats like they are, but they are. Especially with Star Wars, that's one big thing. Star Wars is a huge thing, especially with the most recent trilogy. People who are shipping, Ben and Rey, or people who are shipping. People who are shipping.
That's me being toxic right then.
Oh, or shipping Rey, or shipping Rose and Fenn, or shipping Rey and Kylo. Like, I have never seen my friends get so heated as I have watching them fight with strangers online about their ships. And also another really big thing, because I was involved in the 100. I never finished the final season because it just got to the point where it just was really terrible. As many series are, or whatever, they just don't know how to end. The Walking Dead. So, and The Walking Dead is another one where, you build up this us versus them mentality, and like you had the Carol and Daryl shippers versus the Beth and Daryl shippers, and so I have never been directly attacked because I kept my mouth shut. But in public, people who are very, very public about their ships, they do get attacked. And to the point where it's very ugly, like people saying, just a heads up, but like, kill yourself over these fake people and their fake relationships. And it would be so funny if some of these people are not actually serious sometimes. And another thing that's, for me personally, I'm not really I don't really cosplay much anymore because of health problems. But as a cosplayer, there's a big issue with the cosplay community. The cosplay police and the cosplay community are very toxic, and there is a big movement in the cosplay community of body acceptance and body positivity, as there is, and in every scene right now, with fashion and stuff like that. But it's very difficult to be a fat cosplayer or to be a cosplayer of color. Now, I'm not a person of color, but it's very difficult for cosplayers of color to exist. Very difficult for fat people to exist as cosplayers in the community, because you always do have those ugly people who are kind of like, well, you can't cosplay this person because this character isn't black. Or, this character, you should lose some weight before you cosplay this character. And now I have experienced those comments, or people just being downright nasty whenever I'm cosplaying, or people giggling and laughing, and it's not a great feeling. And it is very othering, because, the point of being a geek is to come together. The point of conventions is to come together so everybody can enjoy your collective fandoms, and to connect with people who enjoy the same things that you do. Hopefully without the bias, like you mentioned. And you can all enjoy, and you can, there may be people who don't agree with you, but, you can still have a collective love for these things. But whenever things like that happen, and that is part of the reason I don't cosplay anymore, is because this has happened so many times that there's not really much that I want to do anymore. And it hurts. And this is not necessarily like a geeky thing, but I'm really involved in the K-pop community, like Korean pop music.
Let me interrupt you real quick. This is a geeky thing, because when it comes to being a geek, like, or a nerd or something, the point is that you have kind of, it's that fanaticism, right? You're a fan because you're a fanatic for that thing.
An absolute fanatic.
And there is a community surrounding it. So while it might not be a geek or pop, no, it is a pop culture thing. Well, it might not be a geek culture thing. It still counts. because I know you're about to talk about the K-pop community, and yeah, I want to be very clear here that, and Paul has mentioned several times the, you know, like sports community, and before we actually went live, Paul was talking about like football in Great Britain and everything, and how just absolutely like the hooligans and whatnot, how crazy that could get, and being like a little bit or a lot obsessive over something is what makes you a geek about that thing. I did a whole TEDx speech about this one time. So go on with your story.
So with the K-pop community, you have fans versus other fans, but you also have creators versus fans and fans versus creators. Now with K-pop, mostly with K-pop, not necessarily with K-drama and with the actors and actresses, but with K-pop, it is entirely fan service. These K-pop bands are manufactured by companies to create an experience for fans to enjoy. And there's an extremely high rate of suicide among K-pop stars. And a lot of it comes from the pressure from fans. And there have been an unprecedented amount of suicides or mysterious deaths, as they like to call them, in the K-pop and K-drama community. You have these fans who are crazy stalkers. There's a name for them called sasaengs, which means private life. Literally translates to private life, where they follow the celebrities, they follow the pop idols into their homes. They set up cameras outside of their homes, take photos of them through their windows. They follow them, stalk them through the streets, wait backstage. It's very dangerous. And also, though, with the K-pop community, fans are really vicious towards each other. There have been multiple suicides of K-pop fans because they've been bullied. And it's K-pop fans is the perfect example of othering, because it is quite literally us against them. Whenever I say us against them, I don't mean me against them. But it is, your favorite may not get the vote for the music award because the other group got it. And so it gets really nasty and ugly. And I have been in the middle of literally sitting there watching someone berate another girl, saying, "Hey, you should kill yourself because your favorite got the nom and I didn't." Just thinking about that's really
Well,
it's really
Bekah, I think when all of this is done, I want to tell a positive story so that we're not all because I have some positive ones, but only after we've covered it a little bit. There are some positive sides to this stuff, and it's not all bad, right?
And like K-pop communities have come together to donate, thousands of dollars for orphanage for orphanages, and also for planting trees in the rainforests that have been, victim to deforestation. So, but those are some of my experiences personally with toxic fandom. K-pop community can do a lot of good, but they can also do a lot of damage. And sorry, there was a lot for me to get through as fast as I could.
I'm going to make a random aside comment. They can save a lot of puppies, but they can also sue a lot of people.
Well, hey, don't do that. Don't get in trouble. I will not get caught in the crosshairs. No.
Listen, that was just a random comment. It wasn't about anything in particular.
Yes, K-pop people save a lot of puppies. Wink, wink. But yeah, so it's, and it's like I said, they do a lot of good, but they also do a lot of damage. And but it's the perfect example of a positive fandom and a toxic one, all in the same.
Well, I think that's kind of any that's any fandom. I mean, I know listen, I was complaining about the Supernatural fandom earlier, right? While I personally have not had good experiences with the Supernatural fandom, I also have friends who have made lifelong friendships, have even ended up in relationships, etc., because of the Supernatural fandom. Every fandom has the groups of people that populate every fandom have the opportunity, the ability to do good, and they do a lot of the time. And I think at the end of this conversation, we'll for sure get into how we think we can make things better. But on that note, moving on to Emmett, just to go in order, do you have any, maybe one or two short toxic fandom stories that you wanted to share by chance?
Well, I mean, I have an intoxicated fandom story because a lot of times when I'm at conventions, and I don't know why this happens, but there's usually a bunch of guys dressed up as Klingons, and all of them want to do shots with me. And
I mean, hey.
I'm usually like, right here on the convention floor where there's people around. Okay. Um, but like, it's weird. I've seen a lot of, the internecine battles of Star Trek fans, but I've seen situations in which not only toxic fandom exists, but it is fostered and it is built and it is turned into a product. And that's one of the reasons we started with Trek Fan, is because we saw this happening in Star Trek fan clubs, and it's a dangerous thing. You've got these social clubs, but you'll have things like Space Navy ranks. Like you'll have an ensign, or you'll have a lieutenant, or you'll have these people who are working third shift overnight at a gas station, but when they're with their friends, they're Commander Bob, and it gives them like a level of respect and awareness that is not tied to anything but their membership in the organization, and it's freaking weird. A lot of I've been to conventions, and someone will be like, "Oh yeah, I'm the captain of the blah blah blah, and we do this stuff locally," and most of the time they're okay, but sometimes they're really, really weird, and I wonder what they're up to, and it creeps me out a little bit. So we created Trek Fan as kind of the antithesis of that. Like, let's keep the people who run it a very small group of anonymous people, so that like when someone wants to jump into a situation and find handholds to like, where can I grow my toxicity, there's no one they can really reach out to and identify as a leader. And because of that, it's harder for them to get a handhold on something where they could do damage. And usually because of that situation, it's very easy to identify those people and then quietly remove them.
Well, and I don't want to make this about myself on the whole or whatever, but that, to be honest, that's a big part. As somebody who organizes a single fandom convention, I run Ice and Fire Con, which is a Game of Thrones Song of Ice and Fire convention. That's part of the reason I have largely stayed out of Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones online communities and fandom, because I am the person who organizes it. I do have a council of people, and then beyond that, a group of volunteers that help me. I'm the only founder who has stuck around. I'm the only, currently, we used to have like a group of 3 organizers, and it became problematic, and we went down to 1, which is me. But the reason why, or one of the reasons why I stay out of the online aspect of the Song of Ice and Fire Game of Thrones fandom is because people know I am the organizer of this convention, but I don't want it to be seen or seem that I have some sort of hold on fandom as a whole.
Oh, big Sam. Like the funny thing is, the flex, if anything, is like, hey, we're doing some cool stuff. You might like it. Come on by. If you were a toxic organization, you have a different outlook. Your outlook is, I want to get as many people as I can into this organization because then I'll be important. And then those people within the organization will listen to me and not necessarily the leaders. That's like, nope, sorry. Yeah. Let 1 million Star Trek fan clubs bloom. Have thousands of them. It can be like thousands of like single person clubs. I don't care. It's great. There are a lot of different Star Trek clubs, and they have a lot of different focuses. Like one is like the Federation. They are very geared towards public charity projects. There's like 1701st. They're kind of like the 501st. They're a costume organization for Star Trek. So a lot of it is the problem is that the toxic fans can jump in and pull people into one thing first, and then they get disgusted with it because it's terrible and everyone's awful. And they're not aware that there were 9 or 10 different organizations that meet exactly what they like to do. But because they got into a power struggle early on, all they know is this awfulness. Bekah has her hand raised.
Yes,
yes,
my hand raised. I figured. I mean, that kind of reminds me of Walker Stalker Con, and how they kind of monopolized The Walking Dead, and it became something truly horrific and awful, and to the point where they really had to shut it down. And I feel like that any kind of person who monopolizes a fandom, Tara knows what I'm talking about. Any kind of person who monopolizes a fandom is going to foster a toxic environment in general,
or even attempts to monopolize.
Yeah, or attempts
honestly.
to. Yeah, exactly.
Because here's the thing: if you keep people angry, you're going to get attention.
Yeah, exactly.
And
yeah.
that's
that's my equation. That's my equation.
Yeah.
So true.
So that's the reason a whole lot of these hateful YouTube channels exist online.
Yep.
Well, that's the other thing too. Like they will turn their anger at, a science fiction property, not into just a terrible personality, with whom and become a person with facts and evidence don't matter at all, but it turns their anger into revenue. And it is very, very difficult to see. Like there's a lawyer in Minnesota who has a YouTube Twitch thing. He doesn't know anything about anything, but because he has a law degree, people will ask him legal questions, and everything will be filtered through his opinion, which is a carefully cultivated response to what his audience wants. And that has absolutely nothing to do with what the truth is. And there is no financial benefit to him to stop being an asshole. Stop expressing opinions he doesn't even have.
A couple of the biases that you're talking about, that is the authority bias, right? We trust people in authority more, and so if you project an air of authority, in that guy's case he says, I'm an attorney, or he's an attorney or whatever, or I have a law degree, and when he says that, right, in that particular guy's case, he's basically projecting an air of authority that he knows something, right?
I mean, speak for yourself when you say you trust people in authority more.
Yeah,
it's more.
I know. I'm messing.
It's more of an ego thing. It's not necessarily they trust that particular person. It's just that they want to tell other people that, you know what, my opinion, that's the same opinion that this guy with a degree has. So that means that my opinion is better than yours.
Right.
That's more like it. The moment that person with a degree gives an opinion that's against you, you'll turn on him too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my problem is, like, there's no way of stopping that guy. He's going to do whatever he's going to do forever, as long as the money keeps coming in. And it doesn't matter how many people are harassed by his audience, by his idiots. It doesn't affect him. He just sees checks coming in. And I don't have a solution to that at all, other than eliminate, like you talk about the bias, right? I try to tell people all the time, don't listen to me. Don't listen to me. I can give you facts and I can give you evidence. And I will certainly attempt to convince you if I think that something is one way. But if I am your only source, like if someone asks me something about Star Trek and I tell them something and I'm their only source, they've made a huge mistake. I'm a minor technical functionary. Like, I do not get to hang out. Like, I'm not on set ever. It's not a thing that happens for people to do the kind of stuff I do. But that's fine. It's really tough to go to fans who will use you as, well, this guy's worked on Star Trek for a long time and he thinks this, therefore. And myself's like, no. I am a 45-year-old overweight, middle-aged man who barely has his life together and has no idea how he tricked his wife into marrying him. Like, I have very little authority on anything.
But they don't care. They just want people with titles to share the same opinions that they have. That's all they want.
And that terrifies me. It's also, every time I see the number of followers I have on Twitter, my heart stops. I'm like, how can so many of you people really love They Might Be Giants lyrics and Dune quotes? Because that's most of my feed.
It does speak to why people are fans. It still goes back to that, though, right? Like, what are their behaviors? I have I mean, it's not worth getting into my stories because I've got hundreds of them. I've had death threats. I've been sent death threats about stuff that I've written or created. I remember when I wrote The Origin of Wolverine. So Wolverine had wandered around for 35 years, didn't know where he came from. And then, I persuaded Marvel to go with the way that I sort of devised an origin for him. And so we wrote it. And the year that it came out, I was at San Diego Comic-Con. And it was probably the number one selling comic book in like 10 years. And it was massive. It was almost like a sort of a game changer for Marvel, very much so. It was back to, doing big things. And the origin of Wolverine was pretty big. I got caught in a Beatles-like environment where I was in a bar, and I had some artists who I had previously been the editor maybe 10 years before that, and so they were very famous, and it was Dave McKean and George Pratt, both amazing comic book artists. And it used to be that I was their editor and I would actually kind of help organize the lines. And now basically they had put up a barrier so that people wouldn't keep harassing me because they just couldn't leave me alone. The perception of who I was had nothing to do with who I was, and it had nothing to do with what kind of person I am. It had everything to do with what their perception of who I might be was, right? And as we were leaving the bar, someone tried to get my attention by grabbing me and saying thank you, but someone else needed my attention over there, and I was literally pulled apart and my clothes were ripped. It was like Beatlemania, right? Now I'm sort of amazed by it. I'm like, who the hell am I? Like, what did you think you needed out of me? And it was because I'd been on stage in front of 10,000 people talking about the origin of Wolverine. They knew I was the keeper of the flame of something that was massive to them. But suddenly their behavior went out of control, and they tore my clothing because they wanted something that they perceived that I was. And that was nothing close to who I am. So, I've seen those big difficult things. But on the other side of it, there is this great community thing. So indulge me for a minute. Like, let's make sure that when we put fandom into context, that even though we're talking about toxic fans, there's so much of it that's great. Now, here's what I learned a lesson from. I learned a lesson as a creative person that if someone had something to say online, and I came in because I pretty much know, right? If someone's talking about the origin of Wolverine online, if I were to come in and engage them in a conversation about the origin of Wolverine, you'd think they would go, "That's awesome."
No.
Yeah, that's the worst.
The opposite happens.
The opposite happens. You've done it, Emmett, right?
My friend, it was funny, Chuck Wendig, who's written a bunch of Star Wars novels. He's written a bunch of stuff. He and I edited our high school literary journal together. And he started working on Star Wars. And I have had so many conversations where I'm like, okay, I know that you want to say something here, but the second you do, you're a studio shill who's taken their money, and your opinion doesn't matter. So let me skip to the end. Your opinion doesn't matter. It just doesn't. And it's so hard to understand that. But it's real. It's a real thing. It's a real thing.
I had gone in to talk to fans sometimes, very occasionally, and I stopped doing it. I will always talk to fans. Like, we'll be on our Discord channel for the projects I'm on right now, and I'm there all the time, right? We'll always talk to them, and I'll always be first in line to do signings and stuff like that, and last to leave. I love that stuff, right? I like dealing with fans and all that. I've always enjoyed it. But it's that's a personal interaction. Those things are cool. It's those weird moments. So that being said, a few years ago, there was a thing called Comicsgate, and it still is around. It's just like Gamergate, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I've never heard of it. I'm curious.
Yeah, and it's guy Ethan Van Sciver is a comic book creator. I think he's primarily behind it. And I knew Ethan. I knew Ethan many years ago. I mean, I've always known Ethan. But one thing that happened with Ethan was a number of years ago. See, I don't do fan stuff, so I don't really do the online interactions or any of that stuff. I'm just completely separated from it very much. And I guess Ethan had made a comment in part of the things that he was doing. This is a number of years ago, where he had told someone, "Go kill yourself, loser," right? And this was, I suppose, he had acted like this before. And the person had previously attempted suicide, and so that was not the thing to say to someone who'd obviously attempted that before. And it, it wasn't cool. I don't particularly like that kind of behavior. But I didn't have any bone to pick with Ethan, and I will tell you that part of this was that when I brought this up to Ethan, he actually at the time said, yeah, I shouldn't have done that, right? And then other people said, Ethan's always like that. My answer was, what am I supposed to judge? Ethan said, I won't do that again, and I'm sorry. Am I supposed to take, now you're going to say Ethan's always like this and he's even worse than you think? The guy apologized, right? Like, he said, sorry, I shouldn't have done it. That's it. Like, move on, right? But it didn't play out that way. People were still divided by it. So his apology wasn't worth anything. He couldn't say anything. He couldn't say sorry because people would yell at him, and then apparently he wasn't sincere, and then other people would yell, and off we went. Here's the anecdote that I told him, which I think is worth understanding. When we do this, we have responsibilities. I have a responsibility to fandom to be kind to them and to sign their books. I never used to like it when I started, but this thing happened to me, and it changed. There are two things that changed my career, and this is one of them. It's certainly the way that it made me deal with fans. I was doing a signing at Marvel, and the way they would do it, they would put it like someone would hold like a sign, and it would say last in line, and so we'd get to do the signing for about an hour. You know, people would bring their books and you'd be signing furiously, and you could see the thing winding down, and the guy who's last in line has got his sign and he's like, I'm last in line. He looked like a condemned prisoner as he gets close to the end, and then we sign his books. But I had noticed somebody standing outside the ropes, and I kind of intuitively realized that the person standing outside had stared at me for an hour, and I don't know why. And so when the signing ended, I caught the guy's eye, and I said, hey, buddy, do you want me to sign something for you? And he sort of looked around like, me? You're talking to me? And I'm like, yeah, man. And so he came over, and he had a copy of one comic book. And I've always known when fans are nervous because they hold it in two hands. And he's had this one book, and he held it towards me, and he was shaking, right? You have to understand, sometimes these fans, they're terrified to meet you. They're worried, right? So the guy it was an issue of a book called Hellblazer, which is like the John Constantine character, right? And I'd written that for like 6 years. And so I got the issue, and I signed it. I said, would you like me to sign it to you? And he just looked at me and he went, no. And I was like, okay. And I signed it, and I gave it to him, and he didn't say thank you. He just disappeared, right? And so the guy, I gave it to him, and he just disappeared. He didn't even say thank you. And I was like, okay, it takes all sorts. Well, a couple of weeks later, I got an email from that particular person. And let me tell you what that was. That might have been possibly one of the biggest moments of his life. And the reason was, years before when I'd written that book, I got a letter in the mail from my editor, and it said a little note on it that says, wow. Inside it was a letter from that fan. And what had happened is the guy suffered from depression, and he was really struggling, and his father had died. And in the same week his father had died, his brother and sister-in-law, they'd had a baby. He'd had this terrible sadness about his dad dying, and then this pang of happiness, and he couldn't reconcile his feelings. And so he decided to take his own life. And what he did, this is the 90s, he didn't have the internet to kind of go to work out how to do it. So he bought a book, and then he worked out how to put the pipe in his car, and he closed the garage door, and he's like, I don't really want to die. And it happened to be a Wednesday, right? So on that Wednesday, he went to the local comic store because Wednesday's New Comic Day. And he thought, I'm going to read comics, and I'm going to basically take my own life in the car. He gets his stack of comics. Turns out Hellblazer was one of his favorites. So he opens my comic first, he starts reading it, and it just so happened by complete luck that my story that month was about families that experience death and life in the same moment. And it was all about like the connection that we have to life and death and the cycle. And he turned his engine off. So because of the lucky thing of me writing that book and him reading it at that moment, he decided not to end his own life. The weight of that knowledge and the responsibility that I've always felt towards fans is huge. So understand that like fandom can have these amazing positive things that are supposed to be there for us. We're supposed to connect to others. We're supposed to see our own humanity in the entertainment that we explore. All of these things are amazing, right? We shouldn't necessarily always be looking at toxic fans and their behavior with anything more than a little bit of like humility and a little bit of compassion and saying, I understand why these people are acting like that. People are scared. People are worried. We're living in COVID. The world is crazy. Russia's invaded Ukraine. Like we want entertainment to escape. Mm-hmm. And the biggest part of this is when the people who know better, the people that have an agenda, they walk into these toxic fan environments with some guy like that and tell them, yeah, go kill yourself, loser. That's no good, right? It's not the fans. We're all vulnerable, and a lot of the people that you find in the Star Trek community, in the Star Wars community, comic books, Doctor Who, pick one, are kind of outsiders, man. They're you know, people that love things because it speaks to their difference, right? So, you know, we should be looking at fans and their vulnerabilities and always have a sense of responsibility to them as creators, I think, right? What we should be really putting under the microscope is people that treat those fans badly. That's what we should be looking at, not the people that treat them well, but the people that manipulate them. Because there's such a close connection between Marshall Applewhite and Jim Jones, the people that led to mass suicides in Guyana, or mass murders, you could call it, right? And these narcissistic sort of like leaders, these demagogues, these leaders like Putin that like kill people just because they want something, and people that go into fan groups and start messing those fans around. The fans are the vulnerable people, and we should be looking at that, right? There's a lot of positivity in fandom. In fact, most all of it can be really positive. And the part where it goes awry is almost always led awry by a bad actor. And that's the thing that we need to look at. We don't need to kind of complain about other fans, even if they're behaving badly. We need to look at who's responsible for it.
Sure. The other thing is, too, like the incidence in autism and ADHD in science fiction and fantasy fandom is no joke. Like, it's for real. They show up, and it is moderated the way that I interact with fans at conventions. It's difficult, especially if you're not used to it. What's going on? Someone will have too many people around them, and they will get nervous and they'll act out. A lot of it is, you know, absolutely at all times keeping your hands to yourself, because you never know how stimuli is going to affect somebody. And I feel exactly what you're saying, because it's those fans tend not to be the problem. It's the people that can bring them in and turn them into useful idiots, right? Yeah. Like, just like, you're on my side, and now it's tribal, and now you're on my team, until you're not, and then you're the worst.
I think fans are vulnerable quite often, right? People who have fandoms have their own little vulnerabilities, and then they connect together with other fans, and then they are able to overcome their vulnerabilities. It's really positive, right? So,
and they also, like, together they can also overcome the bullying. Do you know what I mean? It's like, both myself, my wife, we met as guests at a Star Trek convention, but there's a lot of these bad actors are the kids that were bullied, and but they didn't have that safe space or that relationship with other people where that enabled them to look at that behavior and
or the empathy in general. They just don't have the empathy.
It's like, that sucked. I don't want that to happen to anyone. I would never do that to somebody else. But the people that don't learn that empathy and they don't feel that about other people, it turns every gathering of a geek thing into a target-rich environment for those people.
And you're talking about vulnerabilities, right? So if you think about that particular guy, that guy had never been more vulnerable in his life than walking up to me with that book.
Right.
And he was terrified. He was terrified to talk to me.
What if you had said the wrong thing? Like, what if
I never would. What if I had? You're absolutely right? What if I had? I never would.
You didn't have all the information at the very beginning. Like, you didn't.
No, but I never would. I never would. I've never conducted myself with anything but complete love and respect for the fans, right? And that stood me in good stead. And I've got many reasons why. But think about that moment in that guy's life. He was super vulnerable, right? He couldn't have been more vulnerable and open to any human being. And he's coming to meet someone that represents probably the most pivotal moment of his life so far.
Yeah,
and that's terrifying for him, right? Now I look at that, and I've got this awful moment. Joe Quesada, the editor-in-chief of Marvel, and I were at a table in a bar one time, and a fan came over to us at San Diego, and he wanted to say, he said, "Mr. Quesada, oh my God, you are my idol, and Mr. Jenkins, you saved Marvel. The two of you saved Marvel." And as he came to shake our hands, he hit our pitcher of beer and he covered the two of us with beer. And I felt, and it was this, and he had brought his wife and his children over to meet us, because he was so excited to meet us. And now the most devastating thing had happened. that he had covered his heroes or whatever with beer. And Joe and I knew immediately. And I'm like, what can we do for this guy? Because we don't care. We got covered. We're like, hey, we do this all the time. And Joe threw his beer on me again. See, we do this because we're trying to make the guy feel like it. And he's devastated. I got to get you another pitcher. Now he's trying to clean it up with the wet napkins on the table. And as he's cleaning up, he's covering us with more beer. I mean, we know it's funny, but I felt so bad for that guy, right? Because he was this was a huge moment for him. And now he's screwed it up. And now what does he do, right? And he probably has nightmares about it to this day because so think about it. I just like the idea that as we talk about like why toxic fandom is the way that it is, that we're not complaining about toxic fandom.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're actually doing is trying to work out why is it happening, because the whole point of this conversation is to shine a light on it and then help solve it. And the way that I think it is solved is by coming together and stop allowing those bad actors to tell us how it is. Don't let the politicians tell you why the things are the way that they are. I don't care which one it is. Just
And that's the other thing too. It's hard to, you really have to have like that Ted Lasso factor, that Mr. Rogers factor, where like you just need to lead with kindness and empathy all the time, and you have to be able to put the work in. When you see somebody getting beaten up by one of these bad actors, it's painful. It's painful to watch, and your first instinct is, you know what? I eat really, really well. My cat eats the good stuff. I've had a moderate success in my industry. I don't ever actually have to think about this person ever again. But if your empathy engine is broken, you won't. Mm-hmm. But if it runs, then you're like, okay, I'm willing to put the work in to help people not get beat up by this joker.
Well, and on that note, I want to give first to Farid, because he hasn't spoken in a while. I want to give the soapbox to Farid to say what your thoughts are on or experiences you've had both with toxic fandom, but also positive things with fandom, and then to Bekah, and then we'll kind of conclude with a summary of what we've talked about, which I agree is how to fix it, right? How to make it better.
Fortunately, when it comes to my own personal experiences with toxic fandom, I haven't been directly involved in it, which is weird considering that I actually had a very public argument with the creator.
I'm sorry. Every time you mention this, I just laugh. It's just so absurd.
Like, Jeff Davis publicly called me out, and even then, no one attacked me personally because I think that they saw how petty he was being. But yeah, my only toxic experience was that entire SDCC thing with Jeff Davis calling the Geek Yuri out and calling me out, and basically being petty about the entire thing, about the Starrick shippers and whatnot. And yeah, I wasn't even there. I wasn't even present. I was on the other side of the globe. But it happened. So I'm like, you know what? Toxic fandom and fans fighting each other, we all know that. However, what is this particular part of a fandom to do when creators themselves end up being toxic towards the fans? Like, what then? Again, with the Jeff Davis thing, basically he doesn't like the Starrick shippers. He just doesn't. Even though the Starrick shippers are the biggest ship, not only in Teen Wolf, but basically one of the biggest ships when we talk about pop culture as a whole, when it comes to TV shows. So what is the Starrick fandom to do when the creator, Jeff Davis, doesn't like them?
Yeah. I mean, I think that they're the creator and it's their work and there's nothing you can really do about it. But I think that, maybe fortunately for fans, creators are learning that they can't just trash their fans, right? You can't make the thing that the fan, or you can't or won't make the things that fans want to happen. Fine, whatever. But the idea that that creators are kind of above and beyond reproach is it doesn't exist anymore. It can't, because the internet is so pervasive. So unfortunately, there's probably not much any fan or fan group or fans, whatever, can do when creators are like that. But calling them out for their bad, because that's being a bad actor. Like, listen, saying, no, that's not my vision. That's not what I'm going to do. Like there's a way to approach it that is, at the very least polite, not, I mean, again, like this is a situation we're talking about where Farid had been writing about this show for a long time, and this creator latched onto, for whatever reason, our little website. I mean, Thinking Theory isn't little, but it's not IGN. It's not People. It's not whatever. But he latched onto, these thoughts, opinions, wishes, and he took that to the next level by attacking a person. And I guess it's kind of in a way similar to me being attacked just for writing for the Geekiary, who was started by, Destiel shippers. It's granted, those were fans that were coming after me, but I do think that while I do think there needs to be some understanding on the part of fans that, like, just because you have a voice online doesn't mean that anything's going to change. I think there needs to, on the other side of that, be an understanding from creators that the internet gives fans a voice that they didn't have, because I know Jeff Davis was also really involved in Criminal Minds. Like, he probably would have got a bunch of shit for Criminal Minds 20 years ago, or 15 years ago, whatever.
Look, if he wants shit for Criminal Minds, I will give him shit for Criminal Minds.
Listen, that show's over and done with. But,
they're doing a reboot. They're doing a reboot.
They're doing a reboot. I'll fuck him up. I'll fuck him up.
Don't tell my stepkid. You probably already know. It's probably been on Tumblr.
We already bonded about Matthew Gray Goobler.
Oh, don't we all? Oh. Anyway, so I think that, in a way, yeah, creators can also be bad actors, because there's no reason for a creator to latch themselves onto one particular critic's issues with them and to then go on to, kind of poke at that critic specifically, because they have more power, right? They have the power. So for them to use that platform to poke at one singular critic in a room full of press at SDCC, and also they were poking at a critic that wasn't even there, Jeff Davis. So I think that I think that there needs to be kind of a give and take on both ends from the fan and creator perspective. I mean, at the very least, Farid, I'm glad that you have not had a ton of really bad fandom experiences. And like I said, I haven't really either. But we were talking about the idea of the person who was bullied when they were young, right? And how the person who was bullied, they either become the bully or become the person who manipulates and is a bad actor, or they're the opposite, where they say, I would never do that because I've been there. And not to like pat myself on the back here, but I have my entire adult life, I have gone out of my way to be that person who accepts everybody for who they are, no matter what, because I was that bullied kid. I was that kid who hid my Star Wars books and notebooks and still got bullied for being a nerd and being a geek. And, having experienced that as a, mostly middle schooler more than anything, but also the first couple of years of high school, I can't imagine ever inflicting that on anybody else. And I think I probably, even if I hadn't been bullied, I don't think I still would have been that type of person. But because I am so in tune with everybody belongs, right? I mean, unless you're a misogynistic, racist piece of shit who's going to do the really bad things, everybody belongs. And being on the opposite end of that, it boggles my mind that there are people who aren't, I guess. I mean, I think when we go back to the idea of how to battle, toxic fans. And I use that word almost like I'm trying to use the word battle lightly, because I don't necessarily mean go to war, right? I mean, you want to stand your ground, I think is probably a better way to put it. Stand your ground. Be the person you are. Speak out against absolute injustice, right? These are the important things that I can think of off the top of my head right now. Bekah, you haven't said anything in a bit. So, I mean, and I know you're kind of in the same boat as me, as being a kid who is kind of, maybe not bullied, but certainly sheltered.
Yes, I definitely was sheltered. I don't know. I kind of let my freak flag fly, so to speak, from a young age. My parents taught me it was okay to be who I was. They taught me it was okay to love what I wanted to love. My dad was a big fan of Star Wars and Star Trek, and Lord of the Rings, and so I grew up pretty young loving those things as well. I was allowed to express myself. I was made fun of and picked on a lot, but because I was a fucking weird kid, not necessarily because I was a fan. And I do get a little light ribbing because of the K-pop thing, but I'm a grown woman. I can do what I want with my grown woman money. So I just try to encourage the younger people in my life, especially my little brother growing up, because he's 2 years below me. Like, I do my best to encourage him to do what he wants to do and to love what he wants to love. So he also grew up very proudly flying his little freak flag as well.
I mean, listen, there's no stopping toxic fans or toxic. Like, these people are always going to exist. These bad actors are always going to exist. So
I think that, I don't know, this is going to sound kind of cheesy, but like, I think that being reactionary in a bad way is really what gets these people stirred up. Yeah, you know it. People love drama. They love, and I'm one of those people who, whenever I see drama happening, I'm like, oh, interesting, but I don't like get involved. I watch it from afar. But I think that instead of being so reactionary, we need to start teaching people from a young age, or the young geeks growing up. And it's hard to unlearn the othering. It's hard to unlearn the us against them mentality. Especially, when, the bullies and the, it's very, I'm not really sure what I'm trying to say, but yeah, we have to unlearn the reactionary role and the incendiary role, and instead take a step back and, like we've done with body positivity, or we've done with gay rights, and like we've done with trans rights. Sometimes we just need to meet with understanding. We need to go forward with acceptance and love, even though it sounds kind of cheesy. And we also need to understand that not everything is written for us. We need to stop being
having such
selfish,
thinking we have such ownership.
Yes, and being so self-absorbed and narcissistic to the point where we believe that we own a media. Things are not created for us. These creators share their love and their life's work with us, and we should be grateful that they do. And sometimes it's hard because things happen that they make a decision to have these things happen, and we don't always agree with it. But at the same time, they have a reason for making that happen. And also at the same time, creators need to understand that there are some things that they do, Jason Rothenberg, where they need to learn from their mistakes, Jeff Davis. And they do need to have a more open heart to fans and to their issues, not necessarily changing their storyline or anything like that. But
not
yeah, so I think
changing what they're going to do or what they've done, but
being
not
more open.
Yeah.
You know what they need?
To,
honestly, they need to hire a good publicist.
Yes.
Who will, number one, get them out of these fights when they're in them, stop them from getting into these fights when they exist, because no one wins. Like,
and here's the thing: not everybody needs a good publicist. I mean, Paul has made it. I think Paul's made it very clear that he's been great with fans. So I mean, I think, to be honest, like, I'm not a huge creator, but like I think I've been great with like Ice and FireCon fans, like my little sect of people.
Sure.
Some people are good with it, some people are not. Jeff Davis and Jason, whatever the fuck his name is,
Jason Rothenberg.
clearly aren't. So yeah, I mean you're right. Like if you can't handle yourself, if you can't control yourself, then you need to hire somebody who can say,
What is it Kanye says? I don't need a manager. I cannot be managed. No, you need a manager.
But for them to have a PR team that's effective, they need to first realize that they are also a part of a problem.
Right.
Yes.
1,000%.
They won't accept that. Yeah, they won't accept that. The fans are the problem. The creators aren't. So no PR team for them.
All right.
I'm just saying that there are people out there who make good money to mediate those experiences for you if you can't control yourself. Like there's great examples of people in comics, people I've never met, and just because of the stories, I don't wanna, even though I adore their work, right? It's like I would like somebody to just pull them aside, and this might come from like the studio at some point, where a studio just sits there and just like, no, you don't get to do this anymore. We're gonna set up a new deal with you because we can't have this going on with. We can't have you being a jerk face to everybody. It's not good for us. I wonder if that's going to be something the studios get involved with in the future. And I desperately hope they don't, but maybe it's what needs to happen.
Okay, we're going to let Bekah say goodbye because she has to go. But
Bye.
thank you for joining us, Bekah. We can continue on, but
Yes.
thank you for your thoughts. Love you. Mwah.
It was nice talking to all of you. Thank you for giving me stuff to think about. Bye.
All right.
All right. So, I'm sorry. Continue if you. I didn't mean to.
Yeah, the studio involvement.
Yeah, I wonder if that's going to be just a thing that happens going forward.
Isn't it kind of happening with Disney, with the Letitia Wright thing and the Gina Carano thing, where
I don't actually know enough about Disney to say what happens over there. So I don't know. But
are you seeing a red dot? Are you seeing a red dot on the wall?
No.
Right now?
If there were a red dot on the wall, I would be holding up a little sign to the sniper that says Dave Filoni rocks, right? Like that's what I would say if Disney were asking me questions. But no, I wonder if this is going to be a thing. I really hope it isn't, because we would enter a world of a very I think a sterile environment that it would actually lead to more people feeling badly about being fans of things, because then the bad actors would get to control the entire discussion.
Yeah. And also fans are smart. They can figure out whether or not a tweet is from a PR team or it actually came from the actual person.
The thing is, the other thing is too, all of this all the fan experiences I've had in my life have been so cool, by a tremendously huge factor. And it's not even people just being nice to me, right? As much as I would love to narrow it down, I see a lot of these fans out in their communities doing cool stuff. They're building rockets, they're doing amateur radio, they're flying planes. They are learning from each other and they're doing amazing things. And that is wonderful. And I want to give those kinds of projects the most traffic I can as a creator or as a producer. I want to drive people to the people doing good things and away from the people doing bad things. I am one person, but I think a lot of us can do this.
Yeah, I know that I was recently researching a bunch of stuff and relatively sort of negative stuff, and I was doing research. I was going back into old news groups from the late 90s. So this is Rec Arts, whatever, right? So I'm looking at these news groups, and I realized, hang on a minute, those news groups seem familiar to me. There was a Marvel one, and I didn't even remember that I'd actually been a participant in them. Because I don't do that much, but for some reason, for about 6 months of my life, I got a wild hair. I decided I was going to join in and do these news groups, and it was right at the time when I was doing these, the Inhumans and these big. But so everything was exploding, right? And I was part of this little news group, and and I found something that I'd forgotten about. So while I was researching the worst, most awful behavior, I found this example of something that had happened to me, and it was happening with fan groups. And I was like, and it was awesome. It was really awesome. And the upshot of it is this. As a single guy, quite often I would like to find charitable things, because I used to love Make-A-Wish. Right? I love Make-A. It's my jam even nowadays, right? Like terminally ill children. And I'm not going to talk about it because I'll get emotional, because they're all really sad and they're beautiful and it's awful, right? But in all of this, I found where I lived, I was sort of just about to move down to Georgia, and I was sort of on the way, and I found an orphanage near where I lived, right? And I've always mentored like foster children and stuff like that. I've always done that stuff because, you know, I come from a pretty challenging environment. And so I found this orphanage, and they would say, you can have a kid. And I got this kid called David, and they're like, you can only give him up to $200 worth of stuff. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And then I bought him a bike, and I just bought like loads and loads of stuff for this kid. And I go to the orphanage, to the thing, to give him his stuff. So everybody did that, right? Everybody was just loading these kids up because they're orphans. And there was one little kid, and his name was Rakim. And he had an M&M's character, and he had little tears coming out of his eyes, and he was chewing on the edge of the M&M's character because his sponsor hadn't really understood it, and she had given him a container for his toys. That's it. She gave him one container for the toys that he didn't fucking have. And I was pissed. I was like, come on, lady. So I go over to this kid, Rakim. I'll cut it short. I go over to this kid, Rakim. I'm like, are you Rakim? And he's like, yeah. And I said, oh, I got a message for you. I know Santa personally. And he's like, bullshit. And I said, yeah, I know Santa. In the summer, he's a plumber, and he fixed my washing machine. And the kid's like, well, sounds plausible. Right? So I tell him, yeah. So he told me that he delivered all your stuff to someone in Japan, and he can't get it back now. So he told me to tell you that he's going to send it all over to me again. And I found out what he liked. I went online to the Marvel fan community, and I said, hey, Marvel fans, do you guys want to get together for this little kid, Rakim? And they sent in Nintendo Game Boys, Pokemon stuff. This kid, I drove up to the orphanage in South Carolina with a truck full of stuff that the Marvel fans had all donated. Right. And they were and it was for all of the orphans and everything. It was the most cool, amazing, positive experience. I'd actually somewhat forgotten about it, and I found it sitting in that Rec Arts Comics thing. And I'm like, look, you know, like, as much as we can see this stuff, it gets me to that point of the conclusion, which is the answer of this is that we are all supposed to come together. If you want to fix politics right now, you better come together. If you want to fix toxic fandom, you better start coming together on the things that you love. If you don't do it, it's going to get worse. We're either going to come together and solve the problems of politics, or solve the problems of COVID, or we're not. Right? You got two paths. You can see which way we're going. If we take that path, we'll be okay. If we take that path, we're going to be fucked. Right? So I think it's about time that we look at this toxic fandom thing and we say, well, I know what the solution is, which is to get Republicans and Democrats, cats and dogs, blue and red, Arsenal and Tottenham fans, get all these, put them all together and say, you got to get along, because if you don't get along, take a look at Ukraine. That's what happens. Right? That's what I think is next. And that's what part of my mission is to, you know, you stand up to the bad people, and you make sure that you get people together, you know?
Yeah, no, for real. On that note, Emmett, Farid, any last thoughts?
If you'd like to get together and you're a Star Trek fan, you should check out trekfan.org. We're about 15,000 people strong now.
I mean, listen, if you're a Song of Ice and Fire Game of Thrones fan, come to Ice and Fire Con, because we are very tiny. We were growing exponentially, but then COVID happened, and now this is our April is our first year back in person. So we have limited the number of tickets, because I'm trying to, I mean, we've got vaccines or a negative COVID test is already required, et cetera, but we're still limiting the number of people who can attend. But at the same time, like, I don't want this to turn into I'm talking about myself thing, but I in a way I'm not, because this isn't something I'm saying. This is something I have been told over and over again by the people who attend my convention, is that when they come to my event, they feel like they're at home. Everybody is accepting. Everybody is kind. Everybody is friendly. You can come by yourself, and by the end of the weekend, you'll have 100 new friends, right? And I think that, like, that's the environment I always Looking back on my childhood, mostly middle school and then maybe early high school a little bit, I always felt like I was the person who had friends but was left out. And I didn't create this because of that. I created this convention because there was a lack of, conventions at the time for Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones. It was like right after the show first aired. And my goal was to create an environment where people felt this way, right? They felt that they could come in and come by themselves, and no matter who they were, they would make friends and be welcome. And I've been very proud of this thing that I have created and continued to foster. And I have refused to allow it to become cliquey or, and we talked about yes, I am the organizer, but I abstain by my own choice from online fandom and whatnot, because I don't want to be seen as this big personality that does this convention and also is like this big name in online, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that there always has to be that give and take, right? To be a creator or a webcast host or a writer or a producer or whatever, but also understand the importance of the fandom as a whole, that you are not the center of that fandom. You never should be, because the group thinking and everything, it can be bad, but if it's done positively, it can also be good, I think.
No, I think you're right on the money. Like, as long as you are aware of the way these things can break down, and you devote yourself to knowing how it gets played, then I think yeah, even the dog agrees with me. It's fantastic.
She does. That's Ellie. I don't know what she's barking at.
I don't know either, but I love Ellie already.
Okay, so on that note, anybody have last thoughts before I close it out?
Does anybody want to fight?
We're gonna fist fight.
Like, can we really be talking about geek things on the internet without having some meaningless throwdown?
I know, right?
I really enjoyed doing this. This is great.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. Like, what I wanted to do here was bring together a bunch of people who have had negative experiences, but also are positive people who I think can make a difference or have tried to make a difference. So, I mean, really, thank you guys so much for joining in. Thank you to Bekah and Emmett and Farid and Paul for joining me, and to everyone who tuned into this episode. You can follow me across the web at A Geek Saga for updates on when you can catch future webcast and podcast episodes. You can follow Emmett at M_initiative. Bekah was at Starshine on Fire. Farid is at Tempest071990, and Paul, you can just not find him.
Yeah, you can find me. I'm online. I'm pretty easy to find online. I'm at My Paul Jenkins. I think I'm at My Paul Jenkins on Twitter, and I got a cool project coming up, by the way.
Our Paul Jenkins.
Yeah, not yours. Yeah, I was just saying, it's not ours. It's My Paul Jenkins. It's mine. I got a cool project. We just announced it today. Actually, we're doing a project. It's the 30-year anniversary of Baby Got Back. I'm not kidding. And so we're doing a project with Sir Mix-a-Lot, which is really funny. He's a great dude. And a lot of that stuff is about body positivity, which cracks me up.
Good.
Yeah, it's really about like my wife, love of my life, is sort of like has an acetol deficiency. She has no acetol, right? And so but you play that song and she's like, oh yeah, I got back. Off she goes, right?
But, you call her something specific on your
Nigh
Twitter.
Perfect. My wife is Nigh Perfect. Yeah.
Nigh Perfect. Yes, I love it. I love it. Yeah. I hope to meet her someday, because
you will. Yeah.
Her.
Next DragonCon, I'm sure she'll come down and Nigh Perfect will make a signature appearance and then disappear. Yeah. All right.
All right. Well, on that note, thank you guys so much for joining me. And again, follow me at Geek Saga to get your updates, and have a lovely evening. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Geek Saga podcast. If you like what you heard, please check out other Geek Saga entertainment endeavors, including the Sagas and Sass webcast and podcast and Ice and Fire Con.